Let's get joined up. I'm Wayne Kelly, and this episode is sponsored by Picklock Publishing, the imprint behind my debut novel, Safe Hands, which tells the story of Mickey Blake, a retired safecracker pulled out of retirement for one last job, and Hazel, a desperate mother driven to kill to protect her son from being sucked into a life of crime. It's out now on Kindle, paperback and audiobook, and if you use the link in the show notes, you can get a free 30-day trial of Audible and listen to the book for free. That's Safe Hands by me, W.A. Kelly. Right, advertising done. Let's crack on with the show. Now, where's that jingle? Joined up writing. Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing podcast, where a little procrastination can and often does go a long way, but obviously keep it in check. I'm Wayne Kelly, and it's episode 221 with publishing PR legend Alison Barrow, who is PR director at Penguin Random House, and she's been involved in some of the most well-known campaigns around, including S.J. Watson's Before I Go to Sleep and more recently Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. But she's got loads of inspirational and practical advice for writers. Here's a quick clip.
If you take everything down to basics, a brilliant book remains a brilliant book sitting on someone's laptop or printed out, and it stays brilliant. But the thing that makes it connect is the engine of publicity. And there's a whole energy behind building buzz before the book goes out to market.
And who do you think she might be talking about here?
So one of the things that I would recommend a writer to do, and even if you're not writing in the crime genre, look at what she does. That woman is a one-woman powerhouse.
Well, keep listening to find out. But first, a very quick catch-up from me. Firstly, I wanted to say thanks for all the great feedback about our latest episode, which was the first Joined Up live event that I've done. A lovely chat with Helen Cooper at Leicester Library. I'm sure it's just the first of many, and I've already got something planned for October, which I'll keep you posted about in the coming weeks and months. But what else have I been up to? Well, aside from writing, of course, and panicking about the deadline for book 2, I've also been helping lots of great writers with their self-publishing projects, in particular with cover design and book formatting. But I've had lots of people also reach out to say they'd like more information in general and help with that. So I'm busy putting together what will initially be an in-person one-day course on indie publishing for beginners, but then I'm hoping to roll it out online so that you can all take advantage of it wherever you are in the world. The date and content is being finalised, but I'm keen to make sure any listeners and those who've supported me over the years get first access to anything that I do, and that you get some kind of discount. So if you sign up for free to my workshops newsletter, and I've put the link at the top of today's show notes, you'll get to hear about it first, and I'll make sure that you get a discount code for any of the courses that I put on. And I'll also be running some free webinars for my subscribers too. So sign up for free if that sounds interesting to you. I mean, I don't know, have you ever thought about self-publishing, or you don't know where to start, or maybe you've already tried it and you just found it too hard, because that's quite a common thing, and these are some of the things that I've been hearing recently. So whatever it is anyway, I want to hear from you, so drop me an email, wayne@waynekellywrites.com, and let's chat. I love to hear from you, and I always reply. The writing community is just the best community as far as I'm concerned, and if I can shine a light on what you've been doing or help in any other ways, I will, so do reach out. Oh, I'm feeling all loved up and positive. Maybe I've been watching too much Glastonbury on telly. Maybe that's what it is. Don't worry, it'll wear off. Right, let's get to the real reason you turned up today, a fascinating chat with the lovely Alison Barrow. So Alison is an award-winning book publicist with experience launching writing careers, managing major figures and creating global brands. She's worked on some of the biggest best-selling campaigns of the past 20 years, including, as I said before, Before I Go to Sleep, Lessons in Chemistry, and The Girl on the Train. She's currently a PR director at Penguin Random House. So enjoy our chat, and I'll pop back at the end to wrap things up. Okay, Alison, thanks so much for joining me on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it. So just to start us off, why don't you just give us a sense of how things are going in your world? What's going on in your world at the minute? I take it you're busy as usual.
Always busy, Rain. Always busy. Yes. It's a really interesting job. I absolutely love my job. I think you'll hear that when we get talking. The what I love about it is the variety and the kind of unexpected. You never know quite what you're going to face when you start work in the morning. Um, and I've been doing my job for a long time, and so therefore I get involved in all sorts of elements of our publishing. But I think it's quite uh, sometimes quite a mystery to writers that there is a publicity function, that there is someone or a team, a bunch of people who are there to bring books to readers via the media, by events or festivals or bookshops, by reviews, all sorts of elements to a publicity campaign. And very often, the publicist will be involved from a very early stage, even before acquisition.
Hmm.
So it is a vital role. If you think about it, I usually say this to people, if you take everything down to basics, a brilliant book remains a brilliant book sitting on someone's laptop or printed out, and it stays brilliant. But the thing that makes it connect is the engine of publicity, of a publicist recommending it to someone who is influential. Could be a blogger, could be a podcaster, could be a journalist or a bookseller, and that bookseller then becoming a reading, taking on trust, and advocating for it. So I guess it's a pretty sort of mechanical way of looking at it, but a publicist is a human being who's the engine behind the buzz, if you like.
Yeah, well, that's a really, really good explanation. So, in terms of your actual role and what you do now, obviously you've been in the industry for a long time, and you've kind of
Mm,
worked your way into your position that you're in now. So, you're PR and communications director.
that's it, yeah.
So, give us a sense of what that involves, Alison.
Whoa. Okay, so I work as part of a team. Actually, I work as part of a publicity team, and we work very closely with our marketing colleagues. And our marketing colleagues have a different element of they deal with a different element of promotion. A lot of theirs is to do with partnerships, to do with paid for activity, advertising online or out of home, and copywriting and so on. But a publicist is day to day, we will be writing press releases, we'll be writing copy, we could be going to a meeting with a journalist to pitch a whole tranche of books for next season. We could be talking to a bookseller about potential authors for events. We could be talking to a TV producer about a whole bunch of books that might work for a TV program, pitching to radio for broadcast, for serial, for extracts, all sorts of things. We go to a lot of meetings. We're involved. As I say, right from the get-go. So if an author comes to us with an agent, and it's very often that way, mostly we have books presented to us via agents.
Hmm.
And we're fortunate to get to the point where we have a pitch to that author and agent for the rights to publish that book.
Hmm.
The publicist will play a very key role there in listening, offering thoughts and insights about how the book might be promoted, what angles we might take. We dive into the body of the book. And mostly I'm talking about fiction here. Non-fiction is part of my job too, but I think it's sometimes in a way more interesting to talk about fiction because a novelist might not necessarily think about distilling their years of work
Absolutely, yeah.
into 2 or 3 lines pitch. I mean, you know all
It's the
about
hard.
this.
It's so hard. It's one of the hardest things to do. Even on the podcast, I often and I've been on the other side of it when I've been interviewed
Yeah,
myself on the other way around. There's that dreaded question: pitch it, just tell us your
Yeah,
premise of your book.
yeah,
And unless
exactly.
you've really, really got it honed and you've really got it down, it's just, it is very, very difficult because you've got this, whatever it is, 80 to 100,000 word
Right.
monster in your head, and you're trying
Yeah.
to distill it down to explain it to somebody. So it's tricky.
It is tricky, but it is essential. Let's think about that for a second because we're all time poor. We're always saying we're so busy, we haven't got enough time, and none of us have have the energy or the scope of time to sit and listen to somebody telling them reams and reams. Oh, and then he goes here and he does this and he finds this, and that's an interesting. Oh no, I must tell you about the other.
Hmm.
So, you have to pull it right down. It seems very reductive, but and a publicist will help you hone that. So we work very, very in tandem with the authors. But going back to this sort of pitch meeting, we will offer up ideas of where the book content might work. This would work great for an interview. We might partner you with other writers on a panel at an event. This is how we would position it. And it becomes a whole conversation. And very often a publicist is involved right from the early stages all the way. And there's a whole energy behind building buzz before the book goes out to market and publication day when it's sort of officially on sale, if you like.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we build to that point, but then a publicist's job is to keep the momentum going because when a book, but publication day is it's a pivotal moment. It just means that people are able to buy.
Yeah.
But a new book is a new book to somebody, even if they find it, if a reader finds it months and months later. So a publicist just has to try and keep that momentum going and every opportunity be listening for a link. Oh, I heard that interview. I heard that person say they like historical fiction. I heard that person say, and then say, I've got something for you. Just all about I always think it's a bit like listening and making the connections.
Hmm.
It's quite hard. Do you know,
I
as I'm
should imagine
talking
it is. Yeah.
about it, it's quite hard to encapsulate exactly what it is.
Hmm.
And that's partly, I think, why people don't really know very much about what we do because it's not so obvious.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think for a lot of authors, particularly, or probably people in the creative industries or artists or however you think about it, they're not always wired like that themselves. I mean, I know that it's often quite difficult when you're writing a novel or you're in a even if you're in a critique group or you're speaking to other or even if you're pitching it to agents or whatever. Often that question about talking about, well, where would it sit on the shelf, where would it be in the bookshop and things, that's depending on what genre you're writing and what you're at, that's very, very difficult sometimes for writers to think about with their own work.
Yes. And
You read something else, you read someone else's, and it's obvious, but when it's your own, it's quite difficult to do, I think.
that's so right. And you might not be right in as much as you might think it's this kind of book. And
Yeah,
actually, the publisher will say to you, it sort of is, but it's also this and it's more this other thing.
yeah.
Um, and there's a whole dichotomy with crafting an amazing story and sitting for hours and weeks and months and pulling that all together, that creating those worlds and those characters and those scenarios very much in solitude really. And then a publicist will say to you, right, okay, now you've got to talk about this, and we've got to decide what this book is, and we've got to decide what your pitch is, and we might flex that pitch according to the audience that we're
Sure.
talking to.
Mm.
So, if I know that a particular producer really likes historical fiction, and there's elements of historical in your book, that's what I will elevate for them. But if there's also some fantasy elements or there's some crimey elements, I might elevate those. You sort of tailor it really. And I'm fully aware, as I say, of this dichotomy of the solitude of writing and then the enforced sort of pushed you out into public domain. Okay, here's a microphone, here's an audience, speak
Mm,
in front of them, be articulate, tell
mm,
everybody about your book.
mm.
It's not easy, and a publicist can guide through that minefield too.
So when you're building up to, as you say, when you're pitching to an author and often their agent, so presumably how involved are you in the actual reading of the books? Do you have to read all the books yourself? Does somebody do that and they sort of praise it for you? Because obviously that is obviously what agents or people that are acquiring the books are having to do. They're having to read loads and loads of these books. How involved are you in that?
Oh, very. So every single book I promote, I will read probably, well, probably at least 2 or 3 times. So I will read a book on submission. So when an author and agent are coming to us, and sometimes it's not finished, and sometimes it's sort of, needs some polish, needs a bit of work. Of course it does. And that's what the editorial team do. To make it the very best it can be. So I'll read it then. And what I'm thinking about when I'm reading is, okay, here's a character that's really resonating. That's your entry point to this book. This is a character who goes on a journey, something happens, transforms their life, and they come out the other side of the story, and things have changed.
Mhm.
It might be that, it might be something else. This is a battle, and we get there at the beginning, and then we're thrust into the heat of it, and then there's a resolution. So I'm kind of trying to work out when I'm reading what this book is and what I'm going to say about it. And then we'll have proofs, and you'll have seen those bound up proofs or
Yeah.
proof pages. I always prefer to read in print. I do listen to audiobooks a lot, because I walk a lot with my dog. So I listen to audio, but I love print because I love the feel of a page and turning the page. I'll read the book that I'm working on when it comes in proof form. And then very often I'll dip in again when the finished books are produced, because sometimes I'm in the real privileged position of interviewing the authors at events. So I just want to remind myself, oh, which page did this happen on, and what did that character say about something else? So it's vital. I would not work on a book that I hadn't read. We don't have anybody to
No,
give us a précis. No.
no. Because you mentioned, obviously, you mentioned there often an author will think it's one thing and you guys will think it's something else. And am I
Maybe.
right? I'm right in thinking you worked on Before I Go to Sleep?
I did, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
because I'm
yes.
friends with
Ah,
SJ Watson because I
brilliant.
was in a writing we were in a
Yeah,
writing group together, and I seem to remember
nice.
when I interviewed Steve that he talked about the fact. I think this was probably with his agent initially, but he didn't realize that it was a
That's right.
psychological thriller.
No,
He just didn't think it was a thriller at all in his mind.
no,
He wrote
no,
it.
exactly. And his lovely agent, Claire Conville, said that this is exactly what this is. It's a psychological thriller. What he thought he was writing, and it is an absolutely brilliant book. I love that book so much. I still love that book and
Mm,
recommend it so often. He thought he was writing sort of character study. What if you fell asleep and all your memories disappeared, and
mm,
then you woke up in the morning and you'd forgotten everything?
mm,
And what an amazing, compelling premise that is. And he carried it off brilliantly. But he didn't. I don't think he was, and why should a writer think of categories or genres? He was
hmm
thinking, I'm fascinated with this character of Christine. I really want to dive into her mindset and what you would feel like if that was your situation, and how you would take yourself out of it, and resolve the challenges that you face every day. So yeah, so in a way, an agent can play that role as well. I mean, there's so many elements at play here, but and and in a way, I think the categorization, it some books are very hard to pin down. In fact, somebody was saying to me earlier on, what kind of book is that? They were talking about the book Yellowface, and they said, what kind of book is that? And I said, uh, well, it's a literary contemporary novel.
Yeah,
But it is, I don't know if you've read it, it's fantastic. It's a book that you can't really pigeonhole. Um, but it's easy. We categorize books so that the retailers, the bookshops, can put them in the
of
crime
course,
section
yeah.
or the historical section or the comedy section or the whatever. And there are lots of readers who prefer to go for one particular area. That's what
Yeah.
they love. Rom-com, whatever it might
Mm.
be. It's just another signifier. I think that's what we're trying to there's so many books. Wayne, had a statistic thrown at me not that long ago that kind of knocked me sideways, that and put some real perspective. And I do share this with authors. It's a little bit sort of daunting, but every month in the UK, there's somewhere in the region, and I'm putting ballpark on this, 400 new books are published.
It's
So
incredible.
that is the landscape. And of course, some of them are children's books for nonfiction,
Sure.
debut novels,
Yeah.
series, and all sorts of things, academic, whatever. But that's the landscape into which you are
Yeah.
going, and the choices that are offered to readers every month.
And so you've got to try and stand out in that sea
Yeah,
of content.
exactly. Yeah.
So how did you come to this world, Alison? How did you
Ah,
find yourself doing this job? But was it something that you realized from an early age where you thought you wanted to do something in this area, or how did you kind of come to it?
I've always been a reader. And I mean, really, honestly, it's actually not a very interesting story how I came into it. And I have been doing my job a very long time. I applied for a job, advertised in The Guardian, in the printed
I remember that.
Guardian.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had on a
The
Monday,
media section, was it? The
that's
media.
the
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
Wayne. Yeah, exactly. And when I was when I was just sort of finishing, I did a kind of postgrad in media studies. It was fun. That's all I'm saying about that one. And while I was doing that, I was poring over the papers every Monday to look for opportunities. And I was very, very fortunate. I got a job as a sort of junior assistant, working at Dorling Kindersley back in the days when they were a small company working outside of Covent Garden, just outside Covent Garden, and we had a tiny little office, and I was literally doing that, running around making coffees and booking meeting rooms and all that sort of thing. Foot in the door, and absolutely loved it. And I think I never say I've been lucky, because I feel that feels a bit sort of capricious, and I work very hard, and anyone who knows me will know I work very hard. So I feel I've been fortunate. That's what I would say, because so many people are seeking a job or something to earn a bit of money to keep them going that they enjoy.
Sure.
Um, I landed on my feet, and I worked very, very hard. And I always put my hand up if somebody said, "Oh, can anyone do this?" And I continue to enjoy it even all these years later. I mean, somebody in the company asked me on Monday, I had to go and get my computer fixed. And he said, "Oh, there's a lot of emails backed up here. How long have you been with the company?" And I said to him, "I don't know if you really want to hear the answer to that. I've been with my company 33
That's
years."
fantastic.
Thank you.
And it's fantastic. But as you say, nowadays it's unusual, isn't it? Just, the culture has changed as much as anything else. I've got a
So,
daughter that's sort of in her early 20s, and already she's sort of had three jobs. And
yes,
she's
yes.
22, 23. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if somebody had said to me when I joined the company that I would be there for 30 years, I'd be running out, for the hills. But I think that, that portfolio career, I think you're talking about, and that's absolutely right, because you want to work out if this is really what you want to do.
mm,
I have been, as I say, very fortunate to find a job that has flex. It's really different. The essentials are the same, but every day brings something different, a new challenge, a new opportunity. Um, and I wasn't a very confident person when I started work, and I wouldn't really say that I am now, but I think I kind of know what I'm doing, and I do it, with passion and energy. And I'm fortunate quite a lot of it works. So
well,
yeah,
that's it. You've obviously found something that you're good at, and that's what you've
yeah,
kind of lent into. And I
yeah,
suppose because
exactly.
it's project based as well, each thing that you do is, with fiction, as you said, it could be one day it could be crime, one day it could be
Yeah,
rom-com, one day it could be science fiction or whatever it is
yeah,
that you're
yeah.
dealing with. That must keep it interesting as well.
Totally. And actually, every single author is different, and you get to know the writers really well. I think that is a massive privilege of being a publicist because you do spend probably more time with them than certainly with than the rest of the team, the editor, even their agent. You spend way more time with the authors and you get to know them as people. And, human beings are endlessly fascinating, and you get to know what works for them. You get to know what they'd rather not do, in terms of, book promotion and so on. And you see some extraordinary, and I think one of the great things for a publicist is that very often we can sprinkle some gold dust because we'll be in the great position to say, there's a review going to appear in such and such
Yeah.
a publication, or, oh, we've managed to get you into a big literary festival,
Mhm.
or, oh, I know that somebody's interested in doing an interview with you. So that's great because a lot of writers really appreciate that connection and that ability to speak to an audience and try and encourage them to read the book.
And so often we're getting bad news, so it's nice that you can actually deliver
Oh,
some good news.
yeah, it's ups and downs for sure. I mean, it's never a straightforward journey, as you know, being a writer yourself. You just have to sort of plug on and do the very best you can. And I mean, quite a lot of writers are brilliant at doing their own PR, and I take my hat off to them. Actually, quite a lot of crime writers are really, really good at that. And the kind of networking that, I mean, you're in touch with lots of writers, I know, and the networking that is sort of required to get your foot in the door and be seen. And I quite often cite the crime writer Claire McIntosh as a best in class. So one of the things that I would recommend a writer to do, and even if you're not writing in the crime genre, look at what she does. That
Mhm.
woman is a one woman powerhouse.
Yeah.
She writes a newsletter. She tours herself up and down the country. She's incredibly generous with other writers, interviews them and reviews their books. She does podcasts. She's on all sorts of social media. She's absolutely amazing. And then another crime writer who's a friend of mine, Mark Edwards. So we don't publish either of these authors, but they are terrific. Mark was published for a long time by Amazon. That's great. And very often with Amazon, you're sort of required to do quite a lot of your own engine of publicity. He's brilliant. He's
Mhm.
totally brilliant. And he's great with other writers as well. And now Penguin have just acquired him to publish his books. So that he will now have a really big team around him,
Yeah.
which is exciting.
And what do you do? So when you get involved early in, as you say, very early in the process, which again
Yeah.
will surprise a lot of authors.
Yeah.
What about you talked about their personalities, and as you
Yeah.
say, there are some big personalities, and there are some people that are, let's say, more comfortable, or they've built themselves up into a position where they're more comfortable going out into the world, and maybe they're a bit more extrovert. What do you do? Because I know that there are out there, because I've met some of them through the podcast. Some people that
Sure.
are, even the idea of doing a podcast or
It's
anything is
terrifying.
terrifying to them, and they're
Yeah.
not very keen on that. How do you
Yeah.
handle that, and what do you do in those situations?
Yeah.
Obviously the book's great and you want to work on it, so
Yeah, and anybody listening to this who is a writer or a hopeful writer might think, oh gosh, I've it's hard enough writing a book, and now I've got to go out there and do all this stuff, and someone's going to interview me, and what am I going to say? And I think it is hard for a lot of people. So I think it's a lot about building up trust and building up a relationship, Wayne. So what I would do is sit down with a first-time author, and I've worked with a lot of debuts over the years, and I would say, okay, this is what, and Steve will tell you this is what to expect. You will be asked all sorts of random questions. Very obviously, you'll be asked, where did you get your idea from?
yeah, yeah.
And rather than kind of do an eye roll, oh my goodness, that's an obvious. What they're trying to do, again, an interviewer is then trying to sort of tease out of you that, it's almost like the once upon a time.
Yeah,
That's setting up. Once
that's
upon a
right.
time, this happened and this happened. It's leading people into your book. So I would sit down with a writer and we would talk about what potential themes they might feel comfortable with, where the inspiration came from, what that was. The leaping off point is endlessly fascinating for all
Mm,
of us every
it
time.
is, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I just saw this happen and I wondered what would happen if this, all of those things. Steve Watson's book came from an obituary that he read in the newspaper
That's right. Yeah.
about, a man who'd lost his memory. And he just thought, oh, that's such an interesting concept. So I would sit down with them and talk about what they might have to face and what that might feel like, whether it's doing a broadcast interview like this one, or whether sometimes it's writing pieces. So, a writer might be asked by a publication or even a retailer, because quite often, we work very closely with our friends at Waterstones, and they'll say, "Oh, can they write something for the blog about their inspiration when they went to Italy," or whatever the thing might be.
Hmm.
Um, and so we can help support them position that right and pitch it right and so on. And it's a bit of hand holding, I suppose, Wayne. That's what it sort of feels like. This is what to expect. This is and if you feel nervous, that's kind of okay, because a bit of adrenaline is a good thing.
Hmm.
And if you and also what I would always say is there's no right or wrong answer. So every time somebody asks you a question, if you don't know, or you say, I have to think about that, well, that's really interesting. Pausing that's a really interesting question.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then corral your thoughts. And you don't have to have a scintillating response. You might just say, I've never really thought about that. Maybe I'll come back to you. And can we just talk about this character that I did this thing with? So, authenticity is really key in this industry,
If you
and
can fake that,
being
you're made.
yeah, exactly. It is. It's about sort of being yourself, but
Yeah.
also it is a bit of a performance.
Yeah.
I mean, make no mistake, it is a bit of performance. And I work with several writers who put on their sort of performing act, and it's beautifully, exquisitely done. And then, when we're off on on the 10:30 train back from wherever we've ended up, and they're sort of relaxing with a cup of tea and a rich tea biscuit, they just whew, and they just want to sort of hunker down, but
Mm.
they up the energy. It's a tough gig, but
Yeah.
we're there to support and do what we can, really, because
Yeah.
it all helps oil the wheels, and the more you do it, the more you get used to it and the better you become very often.
I've talked to people about that before, that idea of having sometimes, particularly if people are introverts or they're not, comfortable with it, that idea of thinking about it as a role, if that's what it takes to be able to do
Absolutely.
it. Well, today I'm going to be confident writer Wayne, or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
it is almost that little mental gymnastics, isn't it, to just get you across the line to do it. As you said,
Yeah.
you didn't think of yourself as a particularly confident person, and yet here
No.
you are having to make these pitches and connect people and all
Yes.
the rest of it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it is. I think if you just try and enjoy the process, sometimes it can be rather enjoyable to be pushed a bit out of your comfort zone. And then you come away, very often, has been my experience, a writer will come away from something that they were a little bit apprehensive about and say, wow, that was quite good. And I'm telling you now, there is nothing that can match, and you know this yourself, there is nothing that can match the joy and exhilaration of hearing someone say, I read your book and I loved it. And that's all they, and then you want to know which bit they loved, and where they got their enjoyment from. But that never gets old for any writer. And so often during the publicity process, that's what they hear. And but being in a small bookshop with a group of 10 people who've all read your book and they're clapping and hanging on your every word is gorgeous. And the hope maybe eventually is that you'll be in a big theatre or a big festival marquee, and with hundreds and hundreds of people hanging on your every word.
And that's the thing to think about. So,
Yeah.
so, so when you're actually you talking about well, before you even get to the pitch meeting. So
Yeah,
presumably there's, as you say, there's a big team of people.
yeah,
There'll be an editor that's looked at something, there'll be the reading team and all the rest of it. What sort, so when I don't know how it works, whether you kind of have a long list or a short list of books that are coming in that you're thinking about acquisition,
yeah,
give people a sense of the types of things as a team, and obviously you are part of that. You've got your bit that you're looking at.
yeah.
As a team, what are the sorts of things that you're looking at when what makes these books stand out? And you think, this is one we should be going
Oh,
for. And I know
yeah.
it's a tricky question, that.
It is a tricky question. So we do, so I can sort of unpick a little bit of the process for you,
Yeah.
and I'm interested to hear you say about the short list and long list. So essentially, once a week we have an acquisitions meeting. And around the table are editors who are pitching to their colleagues.
Hmm.
And the colleagues are the sales team and the marketing team and the rights team and the publicity team and the audio team, a collective of colleagues who will fundamentally eventually be the ones taking the book out of the building and selling it or pitching it or publicizing it. But prior to the acquisitions meeting, a submission will come into an editor. They read if the agent has done their job, and a lot of them are brilliant at this, they'll have got a synopsis, they'll got an essence of the book, and then they will read it. Sometimes with non-fiction, we are talking mostly fiction here, I appreciate, but sometimes with non-fiction, it literally is a synopsis. The author will write this, they're an expert in this,
Sure.
or their life experience has been so extraordinary, and this is how this will be. With fiction, mostly you're getting a complete manuscript, unless it's an author that you're continuing a relationship with, and then they say, oh, here's a kernel of my new idea, here's a nugget of my
Yeah.
new idea for a book. So then the editor will consult with their other colleagues in the editorial team and say, look, I've got this in, it sounds really exciting, this is what, and they will say, I think it fits within the kind of books that we publish. And how do I summarize that? So every company has various different
I'm sure. Yeah.
specialist areas that we put books into. And we're looking for originality. Oh, how do you define that? You're sort of almost looking for originality, but you're also looking for something that fits very beautifully into a current, I don't want to say trend because it sounds so fickle, but a current program of writing that is really resonating. So you will have heard that romantasy as a genre is really taking off, or actually taken off, and there's a lot published in that area. There's a lot of crime books published. There are a lot of, there's a lot of historical. So we'll be saying, oh, it's a little bit like this author, a little bit like that author, but also brilliantly and deliciously, uniquely its own. So my role there, so I will have probably seen some of the book or the submission because it'll send around on email before our acquisitions meeting. I have to kind of read what I've got, not necessarily the whole manuscript, because we might be talking about 10 books in a meeting.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you read it, you take on board what the editor, and the editor has done a whole pitch already, an internal pitch, looking at the market, who are the readers, who are the comparative authors, where this sits. And then my role in the meeting is to say, okay, well, the author has a connection with the story that they're writing because it was based on their grandmother's story, or they have or they've written a lot in this area already, or I'm looking really much more at the author and what they bring to the table, if you like. Oh dear,
Yeah.
this is I don't know how this is going to sound to people, but
No, I think no, I think I know. I totally. Given what we've already talked about and the fact that your whole not shtick, that makes it sound like you're just making it up. But
no,
you obviously
well, honestly, Wayne, most of the time I'm making it up.
but your particular area of expertise and the bit that you're focused on is
Yeah,
really, as you say, you are selling the book, the concept, the idea, but really, as much as anything else, you are selling the author and what you do have
absolutely.
to think about that.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, and I don't want to commodify because, as I say, we're all human beings,
Sure.
but there is an element of that. So I'll be looking about at what the author brings to this story and what maybe their personal connection is, because the media is obsessed with the personal story, and this person lived through a challenging time, or their family moved around the world, and all this sort of thing. Anyway. So that's what I'll be looking at. And it really is key for me to connect with the story in some way. But, without going into the detail, there's quite a lot of fiction that doesn't really do it for me. But I have to recognize that there will be a readership for it. So, you have to strip out the personal. If you read something and you love it, wow, that is the dream.
Yeah.
If you read something and you admire it, that's fantastic. If you read something and then you think, okay, this isn't for me, but I can see it's really well done. It's really beautifully written. It's not my thing. It's totally bang on what readers are asking for now. And I know how to find those readers because I'll go through this channel and that channel.
That's what's important.
Yeah.
So taking all of that into account, the things
Yeah.
that you've talked about, as to take a fairly recent example, I know that you worked on lessons in chemistry.
Never
Oh.
heard of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
funny because it
I
just kind
have.
of came and went. I mean, nobody really noticed it. It
No,
was a
shame. Never
shame.
mind.
They should have
Moving
been in like
on.
a TV show or something like that, maybe. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, talk. So can you remember? Can you think back to like the acquisition meeting
Yes,
for
I
that and when
can.
that came in and talk? Just I'm not. I know
I
you don't want to give away
absolutely
like trade
can.
secrets unnecessarily,
No,
but
there's
just in
no
terms of like when
secret.
that came in and the
Yes.
kind of vibe in the room and why you went with
Oh,
that.
well, first of all, we're in lockdown. So it came in when we were most of us actually working remotely. So it was tough because we're a people business, right?
Yeah.
And so, it was tough for all sorts of reasons, but being remote from each other, we'd had to sort of learn to work in our own space. Um, and it came in, and the editor started reading it. And before she'd got really through 3 or 4 chapters, she knew this was
Mm.
something special. Now, how did she know? The distinct voice, the really potent central character, and it was just that, I said about the unique. And quite a lot of people, booksellers even now struggle to say what you go to read after you've read Lessons in Chemistry, because it is quite a unique
It is, yeah.
proposition. Not quite it is a unique proposition. But there's a kind of electricity and magic when you read something, you think, whoa. And then you know that every publisher in town is going to want it. And that's exactly what happened. So there became, overnight, and it moves really quickly, Wayne. So from the manuscript hitting the laptop, and the editor first reading and then sending us messages saying, I've got something really hot. Please, if you've got time this afternoon, this evening, could you have a quick read? I'm on chapter 8 and I'm going to carry on now. I'm dropping everything else. And when an editor you respect says that, you absolutely do that. And you know that everyone else in town will want it. And they did. So this voice of Elizabeth Sott came out loud and clear, and I just thought, this is absolutely fantastic. It's an inspiring story. There's a comedy to it. There's heartbreak, there's passion, there's direction, there's science, there's rowing, there's all sorts in there. There's cooking, TV. And I just thought, wow, this is just absolutely a must have. So we went into a whole bidding war with pretty much every publisher in town. And then we had to jump on a Zoom meeting with the author and agent. And I was on that meeting. And that's quite nerve-wracking because you really want to acquire this book. And it's then a little bit of kind of chemistry, if you like, as
Yeah.
well, because
Yeah.
the author has to decide, because we won't go into the details of the finances. I never ever do, but that let it be understood that a lot of people wanted this, so that
Of
the
course. Yeah,
advanced
yeah, yeah.
levels go high. So that the author then has to decide: can I work with this team? Are these my people? Have they shown enough conviction? Have they got the experience, the skills, and all of that? And fortunate for us, we got it. And from that point on, I started working on lessons in chemistry from that moment. And from that moment, I'm thinking, okay, where are we going to announce this first? Where are we going to tell people about the book? It happened to be pitched as the book of the Frankfurt Book Fair that year, which is a really nice story to have. And because all the other publishers in town wanted it, there was already that buzz.
Yeah.
And actually that's carried us through, because so many publishers still say very nicely, you did a great job, all of you, but they all wanted it. So you've got that whole groundswell of support. And then Bonnie has been the absolute star to work with, and was, and she won't mind me saying this, was all a little bit sort of bewildered by the excitement
Mm.
on acquisition, and also rather sort of a little bewildered by the idea of going out there and talking about the book.
Mm.
But oh my goodness, she's an
So I had her on
absolute,
the show. She's brilliant. Yeah.
she's brilliant, isn't
Yeah,
she?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so smart and funny and articulate. And yeah, it has been one of the highlights of my career. I've had many, but that has been the absolute,
And did
like,
you have a kind of, I mean, obviously you had to move really, really quickly there. So did
yes,
you have to did you start literally formulating ideas and being
yeah,
able to sort of pitch some ideas to Bonnie, sort of thing? We're thinking of going in this direction and we
yeah,
think there's connections here and
yeah.
all that sort of thing.
Yep, yep, yep. And I think I've sort of honed myself. I do, I have two kinds of reading. One is my work reading, where I'm thinking like that. And
Hmm.
then my sideline is either listening to books on audio that I really want to listen to because, they're for enjoyment. And
Yeah.
that's totally different experience. I'm not noticing those things.
Is
I'm not.
that good that you can do that though, that you can switch off?
Yeah, totally. And also, don't get me wrong. It is enjoyable looking for the angles.
Of
And,
course, yeah.
somebody gave me a book, I think, to read, and I would, have to go through that process of looking for the angles and the pitch and what kind of book this is. I could do it, but it's nice to switch off from it sometimes.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah,
Just
yeah,
go with
yeah.
the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of like, there'll be people that listen, they're either just coming, maybe they're at the beginning of their writing journey,
Yeah,
maybe they're independently published or whatever. Have you
yeah.
kind of got some kind of quick wins or little
Mm.
tips that
Yes.
that you'd give to them to
Oh,
think about? Because, like I say, so many people, it's the last thing they think about. It's they
yeah.
write their novel and then they start submitting it, and then
Yeah.
they might think about it. You know.
Yes. Well, I think what to start go back, but to start off with, when you've finished your writing or when you're ready to, send it to an agent or start querying agents or whatever, but even at that point, you have to pitch to an agent, right? You can't just say, here's my novel,
Yeah.
get me a deal.
Yeah.
You have to position it. And you're probably going to be saying, lots of people have told me this book is about that. It's better for you to say other people have said things rather than you,
Yeah.
because sometimes writers don't always get it right, in as much as they're so close to a book,
Yeah,
and they
totally
might,
agree.
yeah, right, and
Yeah.
you might feel really, like Steve would say, oh, I thought it was this. Well,
Yeah.
it is that, but actually it's more this.
Yeah.
So I would say to any writer, step back from it and think, why did I want to write this book? And where did that kernel of an idea come from? And start from that and examine that for yourself. And, write a paragraph or two about that, just free writing about, your idea and how it evolved. Because people are fascinated. Oh, yeah, the characters took me in this direction. I didn't even know that was going to happen. Um, and then social media is an interesting window. Um, it
Mhm.
is a bit of a minefield, but bookish social media tends to be supportive and kind and open. So I would have a look if you can bear it, particularly on X, Twitter, on Instagram, and look at other writers and how they are talking about their books and get into that kind of groove of understanding how writers talk about their books. Read interviews with authors, listen to podcasts like yours, Wayne.
Very nicely done.
I mean, just immerse yourself in the language that writers use when talking about their books, and then you will see how you can craft that for yourself. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of brilliant writing podcasts, and yours is the best, of course. But that's the way when you hear other writers talking, you can you get a kind of sense of what works really and what intrigues and pulls people in.
And I suppose if they've, particularly if authors that have kind of worked with people like yourself, or again, big teams like that as well, when you hear them, especially if they're at the beginning of their career and you hear them approaching it in a certain way, I guess off the back of this conversation, like for me, exactly, I'll be envisioning more those conversations that you've had, and I'll be thinking, okay, the way that they're talking about their book now, or some of the things that they're focused on, that has probably come out of speaking to people like yourself, or it's come from a team and how they're approaching it. So that's probably a kind of good thing to follow, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's then just practice. And sometimes, like I say, no right or wrong answers. They're just answers to questions. But listening, going to events if you can, if your local bookshop runs events, or if there's a festival near you, or actually even if you can't get out about, frankly speaking, not everyone can. The listening to podcasts, writing podcasts, interviewing writers is really good.
Just absorbing this stuff. So obviously on the subject of books, one of the segments that I do is
It's the book that saved my life. Yeah, it's the book that saved my life.
Saved my life.
Obviously, it's a very overblown statement. But if I said that to you in terms of has there been a book or books? It doesn't have to be one. It could be non-fiction. It could be fiction. It could be when you started reading early on in your life. Or it could be something more recently. But if I said that to you, is there something that kind of jumps out that's had a big impact on you for one reason or another?
Loads. How long have you got? I think I bet a lot of people go back to childhood. I would say that the first book that got me really passionate about reading was Charlotte's Web. And it was the first time, this is going to be exposing, it was the first time I realized that I was reading in my head. Does that and then they went, when you
I totally understand. Yeah.
So that, and I have a vivid memory of reading in my bedroom and going into the kitchen and saying to my mum, I'm reading in my head. And I think my mum burst into tears because it was such a lovely moment.
Yeah.
That I think was a pivotal book. My dad used to give me lots of books. He encouraged me to read all the Agatha Christie's that I read under the bedclothes with a torch. I don't think there's one standout. Gosh. And also because I work with lots of writers, I couldn't possibly say, oh, this one.
Of course.
The authors heard me saying that one. They think, what about mine?
I think the Charlotte's Web one is really great
right?
because because it's formative, and I can totally relate to that. That experience of, because all of a sudden it's like a whole new world opens up to you where, as you say, you read,
and it's in your head.
It's such a weird thing. Reading is such a weird thing. It's such a weird thing. You take these words,
real alchemy. It's just magical, isn't it?
Such a strange thing. No, I think that's brilliant.
But also, I absolutely love a book that makes me cry, because it makes me, or moves me, should I say? Something that really I think the most terrifying book I've ever read, and this is the book that lives with me, but not in a really good way. It's Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's the most terrifying book ever written. I can't believe that there will be ever another one.
It's pretty bleak.
It is, but incredibly vivid as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, as we kind of move towards wrapping things up, I've just got a couple more questions. What would you say has been the best piece of creative advice or maybe career advice that you've picked up along the way or that someone's given to you that's kind of stuck out?
Well, I suppose it would be ask questions. It's not very creative advice, but I say that often to my colleagues. Don't sit in a room where people are talking about things not understanding. Ask a question. Nobody will ever think you are. Your fear is that if people think you're stupid and you should know, right? That's our basic fear.
Sure.
In my experience, people are always happy to tell you what they know
Yeah.
because they realize what they know. So it might be a bit daunting in a big room of people, but afterwards, if you feel nervous, so ask questions, ask questions. I ask questions all the time. That's how you learn. Yeah, I think it's not particularly creative, but it's about sort of development and learning. And I spend my life asking questions of writers. How did you think about that? Why did you come up with that idea? How do you feel about this book now? Those sort of things. And the responses are always interesting
Yeah, just
and
deepens your
illuminating.
understanding. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And if you could start your career again tomorrow, is there anything you'd do differently, or is there anything or would
Differently.
you tell your younger self something? Would you go back and
Yeah,
tell
that's a
yourself
good
anything?
one, isn't it? What would you tell your younger self? I think it's a sort of uh I wouldn't I really don't want this to sound wrong. I wouldn't do anything differently because I think every time you trip up or make an error or fail, you learn. And I've done quite a few tripping ups and fails over the years, and that's fine. Nothing drastic happened. Um, what advice would I give to myself? Um, believe in yourself. I still question, honestly, I still question myself every day. We talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and sometimes I think, how the heck did I get to do this? Because it's not hard. What I do isn't difficult. There's a skill to it, but it's not difficult. I've just been doing it a long time, so I've kind of worked out what works. I think it would be, yeah, be more confident in yourself. Yeah, be braver, maybe braver to ask those questions and earlier on, I think. But
No,
it's so hard, isn't it? Because when you go back to those days, you weren't that person anyway. You can only be that person in hindsight. So
yeah, that's why. I mean, this is in a way it's a silly question, but yeah, I
it's a
totally.
good question.
I do. It is one of those things. I agree with you. It's like sometimes if you change some, even though the other thing I think, and it's a little bit like when you write a book in terms of a story, there's that whole thing about when you start writing a story and you're thinking about an inciting incident or whatever, but you're thinking about what the character wants. But the other question is what the character thinks they want, because it's not.
Yes,
Often it's not. When you get to the
so
end of the
true.
book, it's actually not what they thought they wanted. They thought they wanted
Yeah,
that, and it turns out they're not. And I think life's a bit like that sometimes, isn't it? I think
totally
think
is.
this is the thing that I'm after, and then when you get there, it's not that; it's something else.
Gosh, that's so true. That's a
That's a bit
very
deep actually for this
No,
time of the
do you know
year.
what? That's a great, profound note to wrap it up with. I'm really impressed by that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that now, Wayne,
Oh,
if I
that's
can
good. I'm
decline.
flattered. I'm flattered.
Fantastic.
Well, it's been such good fun talking to you. So as we just
Oh,
kind of wrap things up, just tell people where they can find you on social media and stuff. I know that you,
dear, if you really want to. So on X, Twitter,
yeah, just
I
say Twitter.
am
It's fine.
Alison Barrow, which is really easy. ALISONBARROW. I'm on Instagram as well. Alison_is_reading. And I post about books. I also post about my dog on Instagram. I'm sort of on Facebook, but under my sort of own personal
Yeah,
stuff.
sure.
But that's where you can find me. And yeah, and say hello and let's start talking.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's been great. It's been really, really insightful. It's been great to chat to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
coming on. I
you.
appreciate it. So
Ditto. I've really enjoyed it. I didn't know quite what to expect, and I have had a great time, and I feel that we could talk for ages.
Joined up writing.
There you go. Thanks again to Alison, and I'll put all of her links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk, or you can just look on the device that you're using this on or listening to it on. So that's it for this week, other than me reminding you to sign up to my workshops newsletter to get cheaper, earlier access to my course content going forward, and also drop me a line at wayne@waynekellywrites.com, because I just love to hear from you anyway. It's great. And obviously, don't forget to subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts, and then you can have the show downloaded automatically every time. Also, remember to leave us a nice rating and review on whichever podcast platform you use, because it does help other people to find the show, or just use your mouths and tell people. That would be marvellous. So thanks for listening this week. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.